Mike Allen from Chicagoland here, and we are broadcasting from Aurora, Illinois, on the site of a 146-year-old museum that was dedicated to Civil War veterans of the Union Army between 1861 and 1865. We're going to go inside, see what this place has to offer. Hope you come and join me, and let's get started. Just a quick reminder, if you haven't done so yet, please hit that subscribe button now. I promise, once I hit 1,000 subscribers, I will stop asking. You have my word on that. And sign says free museum right over here. So let's head inside. Here's some information on where we're heading. The Grand Army of the Republic Memorial Hall was completed in 1878, and it served as kind of a gathering place for Civil War veterans of the Union Army, as I mentioned earlier, between 1861 and 1865. I guess you could say it was kind of a VFW of its time. And the last member of this post here of the GAR died in 1947. And this building was slated for demolition in the 60s, but the town saved it along with a lot of the other buildings here on Stolp Island in downtown Aurora, and it's been turned into a museum, and in 1986 was put on the National Registry of Historic Places. So let's go check it out. And right at the front, it talked about how these men would get together in encampments on a yearly basis to commemorate the time during the Civil War that they spent together, reminisce, and just kind of stay in touch. One of the things that I thought was interesting was, here's a picture commemorating the 50th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg with soldiers from the Confederacy and the Union Army. As I mentioned earlier, that this was kind of like a VFW for Civil War veterans. The GAR served as a model for veteran organizations for the following years, such as the American Legion and the Veterans of Foreign Wars, VFW. Here's a banner representing the 63rd Annual Encampment, 1929 in Rockford. So this is Post 20, the building we're in right now here in Aurora. And this is a Bible that was donated to the post in 1878 when the place opened. It says this plate below was made in honor of the GAR's legacy, the vanishing army. I kind of feel that way about the World War II veterans now. Here's a metal badge created for the last surviving member of the Grand Army of the Republic. And then they also have the membership pins and the official badges of this institution. This organization was also heavy in advocacy work, helping to fight for pension legislation for former soldiers who fought in the Civil War. And here on display is a Union Army soldier's uniform. Here's a photo of the building in 1886 when it was roughly a decade old. Talks about how the hall was designed in the Gothic Revival style, and it was quarried from local limestone. And also, this is probably my favorite picture I've seen so far. They've got a bunch of Union soldiers just gathering in this building, acting as a home away from home, a place where they could just hang out, share war stories and play cards, and probably have a drink or two. And this building once housed the Aurora Public Library, and on display here is a booklet of the library's bylaws. So that is a picture of the old City Hall, which now is a parking garage, and that plot of land that just sits next to City Hall is where this building was erected. And here's an interior shot of the building in 1878. Much of that is still standing to this day, and I will go match up that shot here shortly. And here's what it looks like present day. A portrait of, looks to be Abraham Lincoln. And then these are the stone tablets that were placed here in 1878 and still stand to this day. Names of Civil War veterans from the area. And there it says Memorial Building erected by the Soldiers Monument Association of Aurora 1877 to 78. Here's some medals to commemorate the 43rd annual Illinois encampment in 1909. Here's a picture of the veterans gathering in this building again, and right behind them is the recording angel statue, which currently is back in its original place after, I believe it had been moved, and I'll explain a little bit about what this statue represents. Here they got some information about the recording angel and how this statue's been returned to its original place overlooking the unknown dead soldiers over here. They said all of the marble that we see in this place is in its original place when the building was erected. And there's one to the unknown dead, which is what the statue is overlooking. And up above that is a portrait, looks to be George Washington. Here they have on display the work of the wives and the women who had to take on all kinds of different roles as nurses and food collectors for the troops, and all kinds of other duties while their husbands were off at war. Very similar to how in World War II, a lot of women had to go work in factories as the men were off fighting. This display talks about the wave of European immigrants that came over to America in the 1800s and early 1900s. I myself can trace my ancestry back to European immigrants who came to Ellis Island around the turn of the 20th century. And these are just some of the projectiles that were used during the Civil War. A lot of metal balls that were situated in a canister and shot out of a cannon. And then here's another one of those metal steel balls. Here's a picture of a Union Army artillery cannon. Mortars each weighed 20,000 pounds. Wow. This is a wooden splint that a Civil War soldier would have used for a fractured limb. Gun below here is a reproduction of an 1853 Enfield rifle musket, which was loaded with a ramrod right there. I've seen it done in several Civil War movies. One that comes to mind was Glory with Matthew Broderick and Denzel Washington. Jacket here is a reproduction of an Illinois state jacket. It said it was a type of Union jacket supplied by the state of Illinois and worn by many of the men of the 36th Regiment. And these here are some canteen and a tin cup that a Union soldier would have carried. And one thing I thought was interesting says here that Confederate soldiers who often had canteens made from wood were usually on the lookout to replace their canteens with one from a Union soldier, for obvious reasons. This here is a typical saddle that a Union Army cavalry soldier would have used back during the Civil War. That rifle over here is a carbine. It was carried by many Union cavalry soldiers just because it was a very light rifle to be able to carry while riding on a horse. And then below the rifle is a sword that was pretty typical of cavalry soldiers during the war. Here in this display it talks about a drummer boy, and this is an actual drum that was used during the Civil War. And I'd always wondered what a drummer boy would be used for. It says here drummers were important not just for morale, they were key in delivering orders. Drumming patterns could be used to indicate which formations troops should take, which also helped commanders deliver orders to large numbers of soldiers. So it communicated orders to large groups of people long before the days that electronics were able to do that. And that belt buckle that says CSA, that is an actual Confederate belt buckle that was issued by the Confederacy. And then this hat here is a reproduction of a Hardy hat, which was worn by Union soldiers. Yeah, we're gonna head upstairs now and see what the second floor has to offer. Here they have a picture that's scaled to the actual height of Abraham Lincoln, who stood 6'4", so about inch and a half taller than me. There's an infantry division of African Americans, the 107th Infantry, at a guardhouse in Fort Cochran near Washington, D.C. Yeah, the gentleman working here told me that there wasn't much in the way of items up here, but he did say that this was one of the original stained glass windows that was part of the structure when it was first built. So I just had to come and check that out and show everybody here. Directly below us is the entrance to where we just were in that display area there. Heading down to the basement now. And you always know a building's nice and old when the wood is creaking on the stairs. Here on display in the basement, they have a plaque dedicated to Mary C. Atho, lived from 1832 to 1930, and she's the last surviving Civil War nurse. So in the basement of this museum, they have on display an exhibit talking about the history of the women of Aurora and the roles that they played throughout American history, beginning with the Revolutionary War all the way up to present day. Talked about how many of the women of Aurora served as nurses and also worked in munition shops, creating ammunition to be shipped overseas to fight during the previous world wars. Also going up to the War on Terror, but also they have on display a history of Aurora's very own women who served in different types of capacities, particularly a lady named Sarah Medina that helped out during an earthquake that hit Nepal in 2015. So overall, very interesting exhibit. Down in front of the building now, and this looks to be the original entrance to the GAR. You can see in the stained glass window up there, and also we got some cannons adorning the front entrance here. There's another infantry cannon. I've seen things like this in my previous videos, but always am interested in being in the presence of old military equipment like this. It's just so fascinating to me. Not sure if this is another artillery cannon, but looks like it's called the Pioneer of Aurora, dated 1851. And they also have a bench that was dedicated on June 7th, 1938. The Grand Army of the Republic by the Illinois Department, Daughters of Union Veterans of the Civil War, 1861 to 1865. And one thing I wanted to also point out before I sign off is it looks like there is a statue of a Union soldier up on the roof of the GAR building. So with that, we are going to wrap up today's video. Appreciate you joining me as we took a look back at the history of the Grand Army of the Republic Museum, erected in 1878. Again, if you wouldn't mind hitting that subscribe button, I would greatly appreciate it. There's other ways you could help me out in growing the channel. I'll put links down in the description below. As another reminder, I promise I will stop asking you to subscribe once we hit that 1,000 mark. But anyways, this is Mike Allen from Chicagoland, signing off from Aurora, Illinois. I'll be back next week with another video, but until then, don't you go changing.